Okay, now I'm going to start the webinar.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're just opened the webinar and waiting for attendees to come in from the waiting room. This is our second community engagement webinar this year. We had our last one in May, where we reviewed a lot of results that were made available. Today, we're joined with everyone to talk again about results that are available, but specifically to focus on results dissemination practices. It's really nice to see all of you who have joined. I see we have community engagement staff, some principal investigators, community advisory board members from many of our sites in Brazil, Moldova, Georgia, South Africa, and I'm sure others will join as well. I think we can get started though, and people may join as we continue. So welcome everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Reva, could you advance the slide, please? As you know, we are TB Alliance. We are dedicated to discovering, developing, and delivering better TB regimens. Just a couple of reminders for our webinar today. We just ask that everyone turn off your cameras and mute your microphones while you're not speaking. You may submit questions at any time during the Q&A function. Please do not be shy. We would love to get your questions. If you would like to share your question yourself, please just raise your hand. We have a participant advocate on the call today. Our colleague Karin Ackerman from South Africa is going to be looking out for questions submitted and hands raised so that we can call on you. We are translating this webinar simultaneously into Portuguese and Russian. If you'd like to join either of those channels, please select the language at the bottom of your screen under the interpretation button. And just a reminder to everyone that we are recording this session today, and we'll make the recording available to everyone afterward. Great. Could you advance the slide, please? So I just wanted to see if our co-host is on the call, Modiehi Mosala from Perinatal HIV Research Unit in Klerksdorp, South Africa, in Matlosana. I see we have Boitumelo. Sorry. Okay. We may, I see we have one hand up. And who is that?
Elijah.
Oh, yes, I know. I'm not sure who that is. Okay. So we'll come back for questions in a moment. If we have Modiehi on the line, please just raise your hand. I think we were having some technical difficulties earlier, and we'll make sure that you're in here. We do have a presentation from Modiehi today. I unfortunately she's not feeling well, and I may present those slides for her on her behalf, but please let me know if you're able to present those, Modiehi. So for anyone that may not know me, I'm Stephanie Seidel. I run the Community Engagement Program at TB Alliance, and I've had the privilege of working with many of you for a long time on implementing community engagement strategies in our ongoing clinical trials across many countries. I have also worked with Modiehi for many years. She is the project lead for community engagement and studies at PHRU in Matlasana, and she is sharing best practices on results dissemination today. What we're hoping to accomplish in our webinar today is just to hear from our site level partners what strategies have been working well for sharing results with all stakeholders at the local level that need to receive them. And we're going to talk about different strategies to do that. We'll talk about what some of the expectations are from the sponsor level and maybe from PIs about how that is done and when that is done. We have some information that we're going to share about research literacy materials that we will be making available to you. And then we're very lucky to have Thomas Lynch, our head of communications, to share some messages about how to communicate around BPAL containing regimens, and also what the planning process is around, making sure that your information that you're sharing is well planned and well communicated. We'll review some best practices from the site level, and we also have some experiences from Oksana Rakshionanu in Moldova on sharing Xenix, and also stage 2 results recently at her site. And then we'll have a facilitated discussion with others on, where people are in the planning process, highlighting some other best practices, and talking through some challenges that you might be having. So that's what we're hoping to accomplish today. With that, I think we'll move on. I would like to introduce our newest member of the External Affairs team at TB Alliance, Pietro Turilli, who's joining us as Senior Vice President of External Affairs. And Pietro is here to introduce himself to everyone. Thanks, Pietro.
So thank you, Stephanie. Again, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all the participants on the call. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here with you. Just a few brief words of introduction. My name is Pietro Turilli. I joined TB Alliance on the 1st of June. My background is mainly in poverty alleviation, agricultural development work, always in the sphere of resource mobilization, partnerships, and in the broader realm of external affairs. Very interested to participate in what will be this first in-depth seminar for me. Looking forward to the discussions. For some of you, very excited to see that we have participants from places like Moldova or Georgia, where I have extensive work experience in the past. And that is in no way taking away from our colleagues from other parts of the world. Very much looking forward to learning a great deal more about the work and continuing to support the work that Stephanie is spearheading on the TB Alliance side when it comes to community engagement. In terms of our future, just for all of you to know, the priorities remain very much the same. And so in my role, it is to continue to secure resources for TB Alliance for our work, very broadly speaking. I don't think I need to delve into any detail on just how challenging an international environment we find ourselves in with the financial crises that are constraining donors, with the unfortunate and very sad conflict in Ukraine, and all the challenges that come around all of that for mobilizing resources, but also, of course, the wider context of external affairs. So supporting teams like Stephanie's and like Thomas's that position TB Alliance and that interact and support the work that we do with our stakeholders, more broadly speaking. So on this call, very excited to be here, listening role. I have my notepad out and we'll be taking notes and learning a great deal. And I look forward to meeting as many of you as possible virtually and hopefully in the not too distant future in person as circumstances permit. So thank you very much. I won't take time away from the important aspects of this call, but again, excited to be here at TB Alliance and excited to be working with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pietro. We're also very excited to have you on board. So let me now introduce my team member, Reva Grimbal, who's going to talk a little bit about the importance of research literacy and some tools we're developing. Thanks, Reva.
Yeah, thanks, Steph. It's great to be here with you all again today on this webinar. I'm basically just going to give a little bit of an update of what we're working on in terms of research literacy. So as you all know, one of our priorities is just ongoing education about TB R&D to build knowledge and understanding about trials and prepare for research outcomes, and basically disseminating, basically what we've learned from research. So, these different knowledge assessments are helping to ensure understanding basic TB disease facts, the purpose, why we're doing clinical trials, and just any specifics about ongoing studies. And they're basically just to identify gaps in knowledge so then we can work to fill those gaps. So what we're doing right now, we have our knowledge assessment, and some of you may have taken this a few years ago and remember it. And we're basically bringing it up to date to what's going on in 2022 and what's happened in the past few years since 2019. And we're also getting that in a new format, which is going to be on SurveyMonkey, which everyone should be used to from all of our project reports. And basically in the coming weeks, the plan is going to be that we're going to update that knowledge assessment, get it on SurveyMonkey, and then send it out to all of you to test it out. And then we're going to let everyone know how they did and figure out areas for further education if needed. But then when we're finally, all is said and done with the development of this is just going to become a tool for everyone in the CE program to use with all of your different stakeholders. And we know that you're always working with different CABs and organizations and health workers in your communities. And so this is just one more tool that you can use to find out where those knowledge gaps are in your community and be able to make a plan so that you can fill those. So yeah, that's pretty much it. And we'll be in touch about it. And please be on the lookout for those emails and updates from our side. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Reva. This is an ongoing issue, and it is something that we have been promoting and prioritizing for years in this program. Building knowledge and understanding around TB drug studies is critical. And I think as we prepare for disseminating results, it is a really good time to check in again. So that's why we're preparing these materials for you. And we're going to test out some of them on the call today. Just little questions that are quick and easy to go through just to give you an idea of how some of these can be used. Next slide, please. So let's talk about results dissemination. So TB Alliance has made a lot of progress in the last few years with completing clinical trials that are ongoing. The Xenix trial most recently published final results, and we have shared that with all of you during multiple webinar engagements last year and earlier this year. One of the Again, just going back to the overall program priorities of our initiative for community engagement at TB Alliance is that we want to promote as much site level leadership as possible. So when we work with all of our partners on work planning and budgeting on a yearly basis, we talk about priorities. Where are we in the clinical trial process? Are we at the beginning where we're deciding a recruitment strategy and planning for enrolling first participants? Are we in the middle where we're trying to retain enrolled participants? and keep everyone that's engaged updated on the status of clinical trials. Are we in the end stage where we're closing out a clinical trial and we need to start preparing for those research results? So everyone on the call today knows whether you've participated in NICS-TB, in the XENIX trial, or if you're participating in the Simplicity-TB trial, that all of us are very much in the final stage of this work at this point. The trials have concluded. The participants have been followed for the full period. Data either has been analyzed and published or is being analyzed and will be published very soon. This is the period of time where we need to refocus on making sure that we've done a good job of building knowledge and understanding of the trial that just took place and prepare for sharing those results. And that is something that as a sponsor, we want to support all of our partners in doing, making sure that we're sharing information with you as soon as it becomes available publicly, and then working with our partners to make sure they have the materials they need to disseminate those locally. And so, from hearing from our partners today, we're going to dive in a little bit more into what does that mean? Who are we talking about? Who needs to receive these trial results? How can they be shared? When am I going to do that? Who's going to help coordinate that? That's really what we're going to focus on today. But I wanted to just start this conversation by providing some high-level thoughts from our perspective, from TB Alliance perspective, on what our expectations are, so that we can kind of move forward after this webinar today with a pretty systematic process of making sure that this happens at the sites where it needs to happen. So again, we really want to promote your own leadership in developing strategies for dissemination and implementing that strategy at the local level. You know your communities best, you know your trial participants, you know your stakeholders. We're here to support you in making sure you can communicate with all of them. We want to make sure as sponsor that you have access to all the information that's available. We, will send written communications about publications and results when they are available. We provide webinars, give presentations, and sometimes are able to do trainings to make sure that everyone understands the results that we've shared. And we'll provide materials that you can use to communicate these results at the local level. We think that it's reasonable to expect that once this information has been made available, that there is going to be a plan that starts then at the site level for you to disseminate those results in a really systematic way within a month or two. And I say 4 to 6 weeks, and this is not a prescribed amount of time, but it is a recommendation. And I guess what I want to share today is an expectation that you do that. And so we're going to talk a little bit about what needs to be involved in that. But for all of the sites that are on the call today that have conducted the XENIX study, there is a needed process to disseminate these results to trial participants, to other stakeholders that have been involved. And that needs to happen, if it has not already happened, within the next month. And we will be sending out a request for progress, outcomes, in late September, early October, to make sure that you have completed that. And we're here for you along the way to discuss your strategy. So I just want to make that clear. For any of the sites that are conducting Simplicity-TB, have not done XENIX, we fully understand that you don't have the same requirements for sharing information with trial participants, your research team members, and other stakeholders. But we provide this information to all of you because, especially with the BPAL-containing regimen studies, these are really going to make a huge impact for all TB-affected populations. We want to make sure that you have the tools needed to share these results with your CABs and with other communities, whether or not they participated in the study, because those treatments will be made available very soon. So that's the context that we're having the discussion today. And just to start us off with a question, I'm just throwing out there a poll. And this is a question about what the current definition of MDR and RRTB, or rifampicin-resistant TB, is. This is just a true or false question. Please answer as you're able. The question is, MDR MDR/RRTB is defined as Mycobacterium tuberculosis infection with resistance to rifampicin or both isoniazid and rifampicin. And results are coming in. Great. So I'm really glad to see that all of you, or most of you, understand that this is a pretty accurate definition of what MDR-TB is at the moment. We also know that the WHO continues to adapt definitions of different forms of TB, and we're moving to a space where there's broader definitions for drug-resistant forms of TB rather than so many different specific definitions of forms of TB that need to be treated differently. This is just an example of a question you can use with your CAB members or other partners when doing a knowledge assessment to see where there might be gaps in knowledge so that you can reinforce information. Okay, I just want to move on to the next slide. Thank you so much. I don't know if there's any questions. I know we need to move forward with time. So I'm going to move forward and introduce our head of communications, Thomas Lynch, to give us some guidance on how to communicate about BPAL-based regimens. Thanks, Thomas.
Thanks very much, Stephanie. It's great to be here with everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. The focus of my presentation today is going to be primarily on BPAL-based regimens, the NIX-TB results with a major focus on the ZNIX trial, but then also the context of what those results mean for how people around the world with drug-resistant TB can be treated moving forward. I'm going to offer some tips and frameworks for how we can plan for dissemination of messaging and make sure that what we send out is effective and received well by our various audiences that we have to be in touch with. So on the next slide, I have a framework that you might have seen in a different context. This is what I refer to as just the 5 Ws. This is how you can think about the best way to get your messaging developed and out the door and to the people who need to receive it. So journalists will use this framework to gather information when writing a story. As a communicator, I use this to think through how do we ensure that what we have to say gets received by those who need to receive that message and act if necessary. So the first W is who. And for a communicator, it's really about the messenger as well as the audience. So you on this call, your role is to disseminate the results of the study that you're involved with. You're the messenger, and you have to decide who is the audience or who are the different types of audiences that you need to be in touch with to ensure that the results are disseminated effectively. What is the message? And the message is effectively what the actual language that you're using to describe the outcomes of a study, why it's relevant, and basically have that really refined and intended to be received well by that who that you're interacting with. Where is more of a technical question. How are you actually going to be sharing the message? I think a lot of us are used to doing Zoom webinars, so making sure that however you're presenting it is designed to work well within that context. But a face-to-face meeting is very different. A WhatsApp chat is very different. A phone call is different. So you have to think about what is the medium as well as the actual message you're going to be transmitting, because that has a big effect on how it's received. When is the timing? So the timing has a major impact on how it's received. You could have, for example, and I'll get into this in a bit more detail down the road, the publication of the results for ZNIX in a major peer-reviewed scientific journal. If you have a sneak peek of those results, you could give certain audiences a briefing informally. If you want to wait for the results to be published, you can give them a more in-depth presentation after the fact. The timing does have a big impact on what you're able to say when, to whom, and that also has will shape how effective your dissemination plan ends up being. And then, of course, every time you think through a 5W, it's really the why are you doing this? It needs to be figured out before you act. So This is important because you want your stakeholders to understand the results of the trial. You want them to have clarity. You want there to not be any confusion or uncertainty about what was the purpose of a study and what it found. So how does this messaging opportunity to interact and to disseminate results help you achieve your goals as someone who's representing communities and TB affected people around the world? So I'll start in the next slide with a recap of what we've seen with the NICS-TB trial. And actually, just a few days ago, we had a chance to mark the 3rd anniversary of the very first approval of Protomanid as part of the BPAL regimen for the treatment of highly drug-resistant TB. NICS-TB, for those of you involved, was the very first study of the BPAL regimen. It showed that evidence for both the safety and efficacy of that combination. And we've seen a lot of progress since then with a regulatory approval by more than 20 authorities, including countries and organizations and regulatory authorities. And just to recap a simple message on what BPAL is, it's a short, so 6-month effective efficacy, about 90%, with an all oral 3-drug regimen for people with highly drug resistant forms of TB. That is basically a shorthand for what at the time was extensively drug-resistant TB, as well as people with MDR TB, which you just defined on that true or false question, who were either resistant to their therapy or just not responding to their therapy. So those were the types of patients who were enrolled. They were treated with BPAL for 6 months, 2 of them extended to 9 months. Of those 109 patients, about 90% were successfully cured and completed their therapy. We now have, however, identified an acute need to improve the experience with linezolid dosing specifically. So side effects, as you'll see on the bottom of this infographic on the right side of the slide, peripheral neuropathy and myelosuppression were very common among participants. And so we saw with the XENIX trial to really try to optimize the regimen by reducing the dosing of linezolid. And that's what we're going to dive into now on the next slide is what are the real takeaways from the XENIX trial? So what's the key message for XENIX? XENIX showed that the effectiveness of BPAL can be maintained with reduced exposure to linezolid. So again, we have a 9 out of 10 cure rate for people with highly drug-resistant TB. XENIX actually expanded that population to pre-XDR TB. But you also show that the high efficacy of about 90% can be achieved with fewer side effects, making it easier to complete treatment. And those fewer side effects were associated with lower doses of linezolid, whether that's a shorter duration or a lower dose or both. So on the next slide, I'll give you a bit of an overview and at a glance of the results for XENIX. These were presented last year at the International AIDS Society Conference, which was virtual. So on the left side of this slide, there are 4 arms represented by the green bars. This is the efficacy outcome that we've seen across all 4 arms for BPAL, with the top one representing BPAL as studied in the initial NICS-TB trial with 1,200 milligrams of linezolid over 6 months. The subsequent arms represent either a lower dose or a shorter duration or both, with 1,200 milligrams for two months, achieving an 89% success rate, 600 milligrams for 6 months, achieving a 91% success rate, 600 milligrams for 2 months, an 84% success rate. And we see that these lower doses and lower exposure to linezolid is also associated with fewer adverse events that are associated with treatment with linezolid. This is also a more geographically expansive study with both almost double the patients enrolled in 4 countries instead of just in South Africa. And again, with XDR, or what was at the time defined as XDR, pre-XDR, as well as people with MDR TB who were treatment intolerant or non-responsive, and with a geographic scope represented by Eastern Europe now, in addition to South Africa. So that's the real top level overview of what we're seeing with XENIX. I am happy to share that we will see publication of these results in a peer-reviewed journal in about 2 weeks. We will make sure that everyone is given the information they need to make sure that those results are disseminated widely. It will all be available on an open access basis, and certainly it will be an effective tool to help with everyone's efforts to disseminate the results from the XENIX trial. So what does this really amount to? On the next slide, we have, I think, the probably one of the clearest illustrations of what is the difference that BPAL and BPAL-based regimens represent for people with resistant forms of TB. So on the left side, you see 1 day of BPAL, which is a 3-drug regimen. In the case of the BPAL-M regimen, which was studied in the TB Practic-Health study, that's 4 drugs. But here it's about 750 pills or fewer over the course of a 6-month period. So, and on the right, you have the corresponding treatment for the same indication. Prior to BPAL, you have 5 to 8 different antibiotics administered over 18 plus months with a pill burden of over 14,000, which varies patient to patient as they can be treated differently. So this is really a fascinating contrast. I think something that we want to keep that visual in mind as we describe what does this represent for the field of treating patients with DRTB, and what are the impacts of these research studies, not just as an interesting scientific finding, but actually having public health impact on patients around the world who are going through really burdensome TB therapies. So on the next slide, I want to talk about the context of the XENIX study and the NIX-TB study, as well as the WHO guidelines that I'll be describing after this. So globally, what is the problem? The problem is that we have about 10 million people who get sick with TB each year. About 500,000 of those have drug-resistant TB. The efficacy rate, at least the most recently reported efficacy rate, is about 59%, according to WHO. It varies significantly country to country, but that's the global average based on the most recently available data. As you've seen with BPAL, the cure rate is now about 90% with a shorter duration. So with the XENIX results, as well as evidence from the TB Practic-Health study for the BPAL-M regimen, also a 6-month all-oral regimen with high efficacy, this evidence points to a 6-month standard for virtually all patients with DRTB. This represents a significant change in how the field has been managed to date. And new WHO guidelines, which were announced to be forthcoming earlier this year in May 2022. We expect that the full guidelines will be issued sometime in the fall, but we'll have to wait and see. This really could be it provides an interesting new treatment option for patients who otherwise would have to be treated over a longer duration with more pills and overall a lower success rate globally. So it's not just that we have scientific evidence, it's not just that we have policy recommendations, it's that we have countries around the world who are actually acting and responding, with now more than 40 countries ordering the drugs that comprise the BPAL regimen. That's where we are within 3 years of the first approval, just about 3 years and a few days ago. And we have a lot more work to do, but I think we're off to a very auspicious start, and with much more to come. So looking ahead at those WHO guidelines on the next slide, I want to offer some interesting messages, maybe an example of how to distill more technical scientific language into a evidence-based but still simple and comprehensible takeaway. So there's some important findings from the rapid communication that's based on the evidence that we've provided for the XENIX study. Looking at the arms, the different arms of different dosings of linezolid, the guidelines concluded, based on the data, that the optimal dosing is 600 milligrams daily, which is half of what it was with the initial NIX-TB trial. So with that outcome, I think we're seeing that the results from XENIX have helped optimize the use of BPAL and make it more tolerable for patients. We also have, I think, a longstanding interest in the question of reproductive safety. The evidence from our clinical studies and from preclinical models as well that we've shared with the World Health Organization has largely alleviated those previous concerns on reproductive toxicities that were observed in animal studies. So this boils down to a takeaway, which you can certainly adapt or share, which is that the WHO is reporting that these BPAL-based regimens can in fact be safely administered. Now, that of course does not mean that they shouldn't be monitored, but that I think is a very encouraging summary of what the evidence that's been generated through this research program has helped deliver. So that's, I think, the context for the study, not just in what did the study find, but how is this having an impact on how TB is treated globally. On the next slide, I wanted to just give you an example of how these 5W approach can help you when you take a look at these results, when you are interacting with your CABs or other stakeholders, and just frame your activities according to this approach, which is that, in this case, if you're the messenger is someone who's working on CE for the Xenix trial, and your audience is your local CAB, you have an opportunity to present the top line results from the Xenix trial. You have potentially a virtual CAB meeting, maybe it's an in-person meeting where you can have a slide, or simply it's just a verbal update. And the timing of this is as soon as we have the results published, as soon as they're available in a peer-reviewed journal. I think that's a great opportunity to find the next upcoming CAB meeting, whether that's in a couple of weeks or a month, and use that opportunity to present and offer a chance for dialogue with your audience, and make sure that, again, that goal of why is that your community is sufficiently informed about the outcomes of locally conducted research, and that there's clarity, transparency, and trust with respect to all of the work that's going on to improve treatment for all people with TB. And in the case of Xenix, people with certain forms of drug-resistant TB. So looking ahead, where do we go from here? I think the next step, as Stephanie outlined, is that for those involved in Xenix, is to share those results, explain how TB research is helping people with DRTB. And on the right, you'll see a photo of the operational research of BPAL in the Philippines. So this is a program that's had, I think, very positive preliminary results with the implementation of BPAL at the National TB Program in Manila. They've had multiple updates, most recently at the Global Health Security Conference in Singapore. We hope to have another update at the Union Conference in November. But they I think, have shown how BPAL can be implemented in different contexts outside of a clinical trial setting. And we certainly appreciate their leadership in bringing BPAL to patients in need. But that's an example of how this regimen is having an effect around the world. Use the 5W approach to plan your dissemination activities. You don't have to fill out a table. It's just some way to think about every time you have a meeting with someone, are you going into that meeting with those 5 Ws fully thought out and informing how your presentation is going to get your message across. And then I also want to urge you to use your own voice and tell the story in language that your audience will understand. So even if you have a highly technical scientific jargon in the manuscript, that's not something you have to just read out verbatim. It's important to have it cited and sourced and have what you say be accurate in the context of those findings, but you also want to make sure that what you're saying gets through, and that there's a resonance to the results that you're sharing. So that's something that is up to you to think through how do you communicate most effectively, and how do you incorporate these top line messages into a format that will connect and ensure that we do have that ongoing dialogue and transparency with respect to the outcomes of research. So I really appreciate the opportunity to talk through the messaging, and I'm happy to answer any questions now or at the end of the meeting. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much, Thomas. That was very clear and straightforward. It was really helpful. We do have a couple of questions. I'd like to ask Pavel from Moldova, if he would like to unmute himself and ask his question.
Меня слышно?
Yes, we can hear you.
Да. Я буду, если позволите, у меня вопрос, я буду говорить на русском. Павел Рукшиняну, представитель сообщества людей, затронутых туберкулезом, Республика Молдова. Как мы знаем, в период исследования очень много было желающих людей, затронутых туберкулезом, участвовать в данном исследовании, но из-за критериев отбора в исследование достаточно большое количество людей не смогли попасть в данное исследование. В будущем, мой вопрос гласит так, в будущем, когда уже страны начнут внедрять режимы BPAL как лечение для людей, затронутых туберкулезом, каков шанс, что будут изменены какие-либо критерии для привлечения большего количества людей, затронутых туберкулезом, в данные режимы лечения. Спасибо.
So Stephanie, I'm not sure if we have an interpreter available.
Sorry, Thomas? Yes. Did you hear that question?
I believe I heard it in Russian or.
Okay, so I'm so sorry for that. So I think that the Irina, we will translate for everyone. So Pavel, thank you so much for your question. If I may just quickly reiterate that my understanding is that during the clinical trial that was ongoing, the eligibility criteria may have excluded several people that would have liked to participate in the research trial. How at this point do we make sure that eligibility and accessibility of the BPAL treatment can be more broadly used when it's being introduced? I hope that that satisfies the question. And Thomas, do you want to address that?
I can speak, I guess, a bit to the component of access, and it's that we're not just interested in running TB trials, we're interested in that the products that we show to work through those trials reach patients in need. And one way that we do that is partnering with commercialization partners who have set up a number of regulatory submissions around the world. I believe over 20 regulatory approvals have been secured, with more to come this year and next. But for countries where there is not yet a regulatory approval, we have a named patient access program set up for Pratominid through Viatris, our commercialization partner. That's something that is available for any doctor around the world in a country where Pratominid is not approved to apply for access to the drug. And so that's something that we have in place thanks to our partner. I'm happy to share the link to that. That's I think the first thing that comes up as kind of an immediate bridge to widespread access that is set up. But I can, our job is certainly not done until the products that we develop are able to reach everyone who needs them.
Thank you, Thomas. And if I just may add, I think this is an important point when talking with communities just about research and why we do research. It is true that there is inclusion and exclusion criteria that at times can seem quite strict, and it's set up to enable researchers to answer specific questions about the use of a regimen in a very specific patient population. So it is very common that there are a lot of individuals that may not be eligible to participate in a clinical trial, but later may be eligible for a treatment when it becomes available. And that's something that you can reinforce when talking with communities about research. Pavel, I hope that we addressed your question. Just a note for everyone, if you select the English language channel at the bottom, you may hear back translation if others choose to speak in other languages. And thank you, Irina, for providing that in the English channel. I'm going to throw up a poll just to reinforce some information that was provided in Thomas's presentation. This is really just a simple question, very quick again, just to get a sense of, once you've heard information about the results of a clinical trial, how much did your group retain immediately? Or, if you go back to your group of stakeholders that you've shared information with later to make sure that they retained information, what will you find? And this is another question that will go into the question bank that we'll have available in our knowledge assessment that can be used by our partners. And thank you for everyone who is responding to this poll. I'm glad to see this was mostly very clear, but still remains an issue that needs to be discussed. Just to move us forward, I'm going to end the poll. Thank you to everybody who participated. We see that, from the BPAL containing regimens, the results from Nix and XNIX-TB do show approximately 90% efficacy in the enrolled population, or 9 out of 10 participants had favorable outcomes, is how Thomas shared that message. But it is also true that historically, or even still currently, regular standards of care or outdated now standards of care for MDR-TB may have success rates of around 59%. And so that may be something that's, that's locked into people's understanding that as we share new information will need to be adapted. I know we have a lot of other hands up, but I'm going to move us forward and then we'll move on to more questions after Modiehi's presentation. We do have Modiehi on the line. I'd like to ask that you please turn your camera on and introduce yourself if you can. I will let everyone know that I am supporting Modiehi in her presentation today because she is not feeling well and has lost her voice. Modiehi, if you're there, please go ahead and we can see you. So we can see you. Modiehi, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Great. Are you able to turn your camera on just to say a quick hello so everyone knows who you are? And I'm sorry to ask you to do that while you're not feeling well.
I'm not sure how to do this. It doesn't
that's
allow
okay.
me to do it.
Oh, okay. Reva can fix that for you so you can turn that on. So Modiehi, if you don't mind just staying unmuted, the way we're going to try and do this is that I will present your slides, but I will ask for your support as well as we go through the slides. And if there's information that you need to clarify, please join in and do that. Okay.
Yes, will
And
do.
okay, wonderful. So just to reiterate what I shared earlier, Modiehi Mosala is a program leader at the Perinatal HIV Research Unit in Klerksdorp, South Africa. And her presentation is sharing best practices for disseminating study results based on their experience at the site. Next slide, please. Great. So Modiehi had, when we prepared for this presentation, detailed a very, very organized approach to sharing results with different stakeholders. And that's why we asked her to share that with you all today, because I think it's very well planned. It incorporates all of the team members at the site level that should be involved in developing this strategy, and it was implemented in a very strategic way. These are practices that worked very well for PHRU and Klerksdorp for sharing study results with trial participants, Department of Health officials, other healthcare providers, and broader communities in the Northwest Province of South Africa. Next slide. I think by sharing this map, Modiehi wanted to share that in this area of South Africa, there's a very large area that's covered by this one treatment center. And so participants in their clinical trials tend to come from sometimes quite far distances around this region. And I believe, Modiehi, the site is located here in the city of Motsotlana. Next slide, please. And here's a picture. To organize this presentation and the strategy for dissemination, we wanted to, I'm helping Modiehi share that there are certain key activities. This is very much in line with what Thomas just presented, I think, with the who, what, when, where, why are you doing this? Who is designing a strategy? Which roles and responsibilities are there? Who's going to share the information and how and when? So Modiehi wanted to present that there are certain principal investigator responsibilities to share first the results published with research staff, with community advisory board members, with other hospital and research team staff around the site, and also officials within the Department of Health, as well as provincial officers. Study coordinators have typically taken the responsibility to contact trial participants directly via phone call or to meet with them as a group to share the results and discuss the plan for disseminating the results to others to get their input and buy-in. And also one feature of their dissemination strategy at PHRU that I wanted to highlight more is also the participation of the trial participants in some of the dissemination of the results. And so this team has invited the participants to, if they would like to and feel comfortable, to join the team at certain events to share the results and share their personal experience in the clinical trial. Study coordinators have also met with the Community Advisory Board to share results, also to discuss methods for the results dissemination. They've been available to facilitate the results sharing and also doing presentations when sharing with other stakeholders at clinics or in other meetings. And my assumption is that that's to make sure that there's always someone available to answer technical or medical questions when results are being shared. And they have taken on the responsibility of calling the trial participants. Next slide. Just to check in with Modiahi, if you wanted to add anything else, please just unmute yourself and chime in. At PHRU, the CAB has been a part of discussing the dissemination strategy from the beginning, and I think that from my understanding involves the PI, study coordinators, the community engagement staff, as well as CAB members to talk about what the priorities are for results dissemination. So some of the responsibilities of the CAB have been to help plan events locally and in PHRU area, sometimes far away from the site, to be in touch with different clinics or participants to help set up those meetings and prepare presentations and materials. Make sure that stakeholders are invited to attend and communicate with the study team any needs they have, as well as make sure that study staff is invited to participate as well to answer questions. Next slide. And this is referencing, I think, the distance again. So, some sites are located in very urban settings where it may be relatively easy to reach all of the clinics within a certain distance. But in Matswadlana, there is quite a distance between some of the clinics. One thing that PHRU did in disseminating results in the past is going back to all of the referral clinics they had used to enroll participants and make sure that they were going back to that setting and sharing the results with the clinic nurses and the clinic managers and other staff that had helped to identify participants for the study. So sometimes that can be at great distance and does need to be organized. The CAB and community liaison managers have been involved in helping to set that up and make sure that there's participation of trial participants and family members in that area if they would like to participate, making sure that there's other stakeholders involved, and setting this up as a real event that may need some refreshments and some venue to be set up. So events like this do require planning and a lot of coordination. Next slide. So again, in further dissemination, the CAB and community liaison officer have taken the responsibility to then further disseminate these results to other stakeholders like NGOs, CBOs, other interested parties in the surrounding area. And I think this has, from my understanding, been a really helpful opportunity for the CAB to continue building those strong relationships with local stakeholders, help them understand the results of one study, but maybe also talk about what else is happening at the research site so that there's an understanding of all of the research activities that are happening in that area. CAB members did participate in giving presentations, which is fantastic. Next slide. So I think Modiahi wanted to share some of the benefits of having such a structured plan for disseminating the results. my understanding is that this approach has really helped to secure stakeholder buy-in in the research, but also in understanding the outcomes of that research. The health department appreciates that level of engagement. This process has helped to empower community advisory board members to participate in building a dissemination plan and also participating in sharing results. It has empowered the study staff to also participate in this way and strengthened relationships with local stakeholders like NGOs and other community stakeholders that are key in the district. For trial participants to also be invited to participate in this process, a sense of worth is what I see here, and I imagine that meant a great deal to them to be able to be included and share their experience, as research and outcomes of research are not possible with the commitments and gracious participation of our trial participants. Next slide, please. This is the Matlasana cab. I know we have some questions. Modiahi, I hope that came through okay and represented your thoughts. I know it's very hard for you to talk, but if you're able to join us again, just, okay, I'm getting a note that worked well. Thank you so much, Modiahi. I do just want to throw up one more poll while we're getting some questions. And this is just a question to get us talking a little bit about how everyone else is doing. And this is just a question to kind of help us figure out where everyone is. The question is, have you organized results dissemination at your site already? Yes, no, you're in the process, or I don't think that's my responsibility. And while we're going through that, I do just want to highlight a question that we have from Sandile. Wanted to ask on BPAL accessibility, are drugs on BPAL registered in every country regulatory bodies? Affordability is for TB is more in developing countries such as South Africa, underdeveloped. Will they be able to afford to save lives? Thank you so much, Sandile, for that question. I'll invite Thomas to weigh in as well.
Sure, happy to speak to that. So I'm going to share a link to a webpage that we put together that shows just about every country and what the current status is with respect to accessing the BPAL regimen. For South Africa, we've heard, I think, very encouraging plans from the head of TB, Dr. Norbert Njeka, which is to scale up access to BPAL by the end of this year. He announced a few months ago. So that's, I think, a very bold and encouraging plan. I know South Africa has also been embarking on a national BPAL clinical access program to ensure the continuity of treatment beyond the TB Alliance clinical trials. So that's been ongoing under the leadership of Dr. Njeka, as well as Dr. Francesca Conradi, who's been a key partner of ours throughout the entire BPAL experience. So we as I mentioned, access is essential to our mission. It's not just developing new therapies, it's ensuring that they reach patients in need. And affordability, I think, is something that's a very interesting question. The typical expense for the pill burden for typical DRTB therapy ranges per STAC2B partnership anywhere from $2,000 US to $8,000 US over the course of a treatment experience for at least low and middle income countries that have high TB burdens. With respect to the BPAL regimen and the BPAL-M regimen, the GDF, the Global Drug Facility, has made that regimen available to 150 low and middle income countries that bear the vast majority of the TB burden at a price of less than $700 for the entire BPAL regimen over 6 months. So in terms of the cost of products, we are seeing a significant change and a reduction in that cost of the pills, as well as, of course, higher success rates and a shorter treatment duration. So that, I think, is an encouraging place to start. And we hope that as the WHO guidelines take effect, as countries respond and expand access to these regimens, that the economies of scale will kick in, the price will go down as volumes increase. And TB Alliance has brought on not just one, but in fact 4 total manufacturers for Protonida to ensure that there is robust competition, which can bring the price down while still ensuring that there's a sustainable supply at a high quality. So that's core to our access planning. I'll put a link to the BPAL access page in the chat, and I hope that that speaks to your question. Thanks very much for asking.
Thanks so much, Thomas. I'm not sure that the chat function is open to all participants. If not, we will also make sure that the information is shared when we send a summary of the meeting. I also have a note from Modiehi that it is true, PHRU is one of the sites in South Africa that is involved in the BPAL access program in South Africa. So South Africa is actually taking very significant steps to introduce BPAL treatments, so BPAL containing regimens for DRTB patients in South Africa, and that is currently being rolled out. Okay, so we have some results. We have a fair split. You know, a lot of people have answered that they have organized results dissemination at their site. Some of them are in process, some no, some may not think that that is their responsibility. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in the facilitated discussion. I do see hands raised, but I do need to move us forward so that we don't run out of time. And then once we open up for facilitated discussion, I hope we can hear from everyone. Next slide, please. Great, thank you, Reva. I'd like to introduce Oksana Ruksiananu from SMIT in Moldova. She's going to share briefly some experience from sharing Zenix results recently there.
Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, Thomas. Thank you, everyone, for inviting me. And I'm again happy to be here and to have the opportunity to speak to the CAPS and other TB stakeholders here. I would like to share some experience of results dissemination, taking into consideration that we as country and as a CAP have participated in 2 clinical trials. We had STREAM Stage 2 and we had Zenix. And that's not a specific selection of trials, that's just the only 2 trials that have actually applied for community engagement and applied and implemented the GPP approach. So that's a very good practice for our country. What is important to say when we are speaking about disseminating the results as a process? That's of course to focus on those questions, and Thomas and Stephanie as well, and Modeli in her presentation as well, in a way refer to the same. We need to know why we did this, and we had the trial implemented in the country or in the site. What was the message? What was the objective of those trials? And what was the study about? Who did it? And what is one of the most important is what comes next after the results is already available and disseminated. If we are comparing, and I'm not and I don't mean to confront any strategies, just to show as an example how different the strategies when we are implementing and disseminating results, the strategies can be used and can be absolutely different. If we are saying about the STREAM Stage 2 results dissemination, which is actually now in the full process in the countries, and I have seen a lot of CAPs here from this STREAM Stage 2, and thank you for Pedro again to inviting and making us understand how strong the network that has been created during the STREAM Stage 2 is still valid, and we are all together here. We used a tailored approach to disseminate the results during the STREAM Stage 2. We had the preparatory webinars, we had separate meetings to disseminate the results coming from the principal investigators to CAPs. Then we had followed the different steps to disseminate all this information that we have received from the CAPs to different levels, to civil society, people have in the country, or non-governmental organizations. Then we have the dissemination from the principal investigator at the scientific level. We're speaking about doctors who need to know about all the progresses and benefits of the clinical trials. As well, what is specific to the result, this tailored approach in stream 2 was the discussion related only to the results dissemination with a preset budget. And if we are speaking about this, other approach, which has been used by Zenix and it is still used by Zenix, and I'm referring to the sponsor to be Alliance. It's of course about the opportunity to have a choice, and I would say that we in the country use the self-independent approach. We plan for the country dissemination results in the country. We actually had the same audience to disseminate the results. We disseminated and we invited to the Alliance Dr. Farida to present at the conference, having over 300 people. And I would say that that's a big audience for our country to disseminate the results. And that has been done very successfully. As well, to make a comparison, we do have here community engagement forums, and we do continue to have an outreach activities. Why it happens? Because when we budgeted and we negotiated the discussion about the plan of community engagement, we included the dissemination plan as part of our broader community engagement. And that's the difference. We've been given this opportunity to work more broadly and to disseminate the results as part of a larger plan. What is important for us to know is whether we have in our CAPs, and that's a question to people present here, whether we do have the capacities and the abilities to do the leadership and to disseminate the results in the country, or we need a tailored approach. But that's an open question, and I think we will hope people will come and will say what they think is the best for their country. All the country are absolutely different, and both approaches are absolutely feasible in the areas once we know what works better to disseminate the results, to bring the key messages, because what is important to know at the end of a trial is what is the key messages and what comes next of it. Next slide, please, Stephanie. And of course, just to conclude, and that's again like key messages in the end, what we need to focus is to understand that the evidence provided by the studies actually support new recommendation, and Thomas said that it is already there, and we all have all the tools available to disseminate the right information to those people who will make the decision. Having the new WHO recommendation already referring to the results of the PAL, and of course for us at our country level is already in our mission and in our leadership to come with those recommendations of WHO and try to make and to influence the policy making in the country, and to see when is the best and favorable moment to insist and to call for policy adjustments of guidelines at country level, so that we all have all these wonderful treatment regimens available and accessible in the countries. Again, to conclude, but there are different approaches for results dissemination, and absolutely all the approaches will work and will be great depending on various factors, and we've spoken about it. Stream used a tailored approach, while Zenix, we had the possibility to decide what is best to do, taking into consideration that we do want to play an important role and assume leadership and building very good relations with our principal investigator. And thank you for our principal investigator who is present here, Dr. Elena Tudor. She is always supporting us in everything we are doing, and we are like colleagues more than just working together, and that's absolutely important. What is a key message is that participatory engagement in results dissemination is absolutely crucial, and it helps build synergies with researchers and improves communication with trial participants in the end. Of course, it's per general, the engagement of communities in research and development leads to better knowledge, better literacy, research literacy, and this is something absolutely specific. That's why we need to absolutely build on our capacities and continuous learning and learning and learning. And that's why only about different assessments of knowledge and implementing different training materials, we will be able to play our role of TB activists in our countries. One message to end is that result dissemination is not the end of a clinical trial. I would say that we, those who are committed to make TB treatments easier and more efficient for patients, for trial participants, and then for TB people per general in the country, while programmatic use of regimens, we need to continue doing our work, not end abruptly the activities with result dissemination. We need to know that whether the results of a clinical trial are absolutely benefic, we need to see them in our national guidelines in the country, so that the existing regimens which are available at global level are available in our countries. That's it, and I thank you so much for being with us. So I think we have now time for a facilitated discussion, and I will, as I put already a question about what people would think is the best to use while disseminating the results. I have a lot of colleagues from Stream, so I can call their names, but everyone is open to raise their hand and share their impressions about what works best in their sites or their communities. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Oksana. I think, yeah, if you don't mind just staying available and unmuted. So I threw up this question that Oksana is asking about, and just to respond to Oksana's presentation also, I think it's very important that we're highlighting different best practices here. There are many different ways to approach this process. It's something that does need to happen at every site that's conducted a clinical trial, and there's different ways to do that. What I can represent from the sponsor perspective is what we can do. What I hope to gain from all of you is what you expect from us as well. And you know, I hope that we can maybe hear a little bit of that today, but also we can continue that next time. You know, apart from sharing information promptly and making sure you have materials and time to workshop those messages to be prepared to share them. In addition to that, we're here to support you, as I mentioned, but we're also funding programs. And I think that it is important to acknowledge that putting these events together does require funding. And you know, and as the next step that Oksana just mentioned, that engagement doesn't stop when clinical trials stop. The unfortunate reality is that sometimes funding is harder to sustain once clinical trials are finished. TB Alliance is committed to funding engagement activities until final results that have been published have been properly disseminated in your communities, which means that we have time to support you while you're doing these engagements. And that is very important to us. That's part of the support that we're providing to you. The other thing I just wanted to mention before I open it up to Oksana and others, if you have questions specifically for Modiehi, please write them into the Q&A function. I see that she's able to answer those in written format. So that's one way that she can participate. Thanks so much. Oksana, over to you.
Thank you, Stephanie. And that's good for you, what you mentioned, that you are supporting the community engagement. At the same time, I would say from the perspective of communities that we need to push, but that the support goes on and it doesn't end with the clinical trial result dissemination. So that's our job. You are doing your job. So we need to find a common place and to push for hubs in the countries to continue their engagement and to continue supporting people and trying in a way or another to participate in the process of identifying better TB regimens for TB people in the countries. It's absolutely interesting to see the results of the best prepared approach, and I would say that's around 67% goes to community engagement ownership. So I think that's absolutely crucial, and I'm happy that my colleagues, I think they absolutely, those that we've been in contact for 5 years, are inclined to consider that we need ownership of the process, and that puts an absolutely great role, and I say great responsibility in communities. Once they decide that they can own this process, they need to have a good plan and to disseminate the results the way they think is better for their setting and their sites. In the same time, we have 46% of participants who are inclined to have a tailored approach led by the principal investigator, which is good as well, because we understand that there are sites we need more leadership, and maybe there is, as we know, this skepticism towards the buy-in from the research teams towards communities, and that's another focus to be addressed. So, but in general, that's absolutely good. So it's important to see that people are identifying the best way to disseminate results. The fact is that the process should go, and it should end with the clear messages, key messages, which came to the table at the table of the scientific people in the country, at the table of communities, and at the table of policymakers in the country, so that the results translate into national policy guidance. So that's do we have another question?
We do. I actually was hoping that we could stay on this for just a moment. And since we actually have the privilege of having some principal investigators on the call today, I'm wondering if anyone would be willing to share from your perspective how you would like to use the teams available for you at your site to make sure that these dissemination plans are successful, without calling anyone out. I know we have Dr. Tudor on the line, we have Nastani in Georgia. If anyone else is willing to speak up, please, you're invited to join us. You can raise your hand and we can make sure you're unmuted. Okay, who's that? Great, we have Omar in Tanzania. Please go ahead, Omar. And then we'll go to Nastani. You just have to unmute yourself, Omar.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so usually in Bagamoyo, we would like first to invite the journalists because we have stakeholders like a journalist from different newspaper and radio in Tanzania. So we would like to invite them for like a few hours seminar. Then during that time, we will use the publication from the TB Alliance and WHO about the results, and then we'll translate that information to Swahili so that even the Swahili newspaper, which is the main Tanzanian language, can be read by anyone in Tanzania. That is the first thing. And the second one, we usually use the meeting, face-to-face meeting. In Tanzania, we have a village where there's a regular meeting. So we can use that meeting to disseminate the information about the result of the trial. So that is the main dissemination method. We use it in Bagamoyo, Tanzania.
Thank you so much for sharing, Omar. I'm glad that you brought that up. Media is one of the other groups of stakeholders that can be a target for sharing results. So that's absolutely right. Nastani, if you could go ahead with your comments.
Yes, thank you so much for giving an opportunity to speak up. Hope you can hear me clearly.
Yes, we can.
Yeah, okay. So the way we do it, usually it's driven by the study team, PI and SUBICE. And why is that? Usually we are the ones who receive, let's say, the information on the publication, official results, and we usually drive the process, initiate providing this information to the community advisory board members. From that point, further dissemination of results, it's really led by the CAB, the CAB members. And they use all different means, and they try to have different audiences. The journalists, similar to the other sites, ex-patients, NGOs, stakeholders, national policymakers. So there will be all different targeted groups they would like to approach. And we are only supporting in that process. And I think it's eventually working well. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing. Oksana, I'm going to pop up this other question that you wanted to ask. Let me make sure I'm doing the right one. What is needed for successful dissemination?
Yeah, I think it will be great to see people's perspective. What are the tools they're needing?
Perfect. So while that is
results.
running, could I invite Ksenia to unmute yourself and please share your questions?
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, Ksenia.
Yes, we do.
I don't know how put my video on, so
we can hear you.
You can hear me. Okay. I just say that I'm so glad to be with you here. And about dissemination, I listened to Oksana many times because we're sharing our experience with TB-CAP a lot. And in the last annual TB-CAP meeting in Montreal, we both with Oksana be remotely online because it was problem with Canadian visas, but online is better than nothing. Yeah. So I want to say that maybe in the next session like this, I want to share my experience in Russia. I have not much contact. It's very pity that our sites not sharing much with us their experience. We know only data that they send it to you, but we have some contacts in one side because of Alexander Chebin did greatest work in Yekaterinburg side. So yeah, but we did a lot of work with the media, and we're sharing results and our future with the new drugs, with the new schemes, and people are very excited about it because my main goal was in Russia that we prevent the situation with Tritonide because we have a bad situation with bedaquiline in our media because many patients were scary about using bedaquiline in those years. It was very bad media about it. It's like it's Americans want to destroy it, the system and so on. And yeah, I know some very, very sad stories when people are to be so afraid to use this new drugs that they get pills and don't drink them, and they died because of they was scary a lot. And I wanted very much that we prevent the situation with the Precomanid. And yes, we have we did it. Yes.
Right.
Patient chat for Russian speaking patient, not only from Russia, but also Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Belarus, and Ukraine, who asking about Pertumanid, who ask when we, and people who was treated by Pertumanid sharing the experience in this big patient group. It's like 600 patients. And we have some people from Russia who was on those trials. And yeah, it's was so lucky that they sharing experience of how they were treated in Russia. I will do an interview with one of them. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank
Yeah.
you so much, Ksenia. I think that your suggestion to circle back to the discussion to highlight challenges and this, you know, as well as you could plan out a dissemination strategy, sometimes you will hit barriers. And we do understand that you have significant barriers with communication with researchers in Russia, and we can definitely talk about that.
But we work so much with the media, and we have a TV shows about this, and articles, and big work with the patient community. And I teach myself for my moderators that they will be able to speak about trials, about future of short schemes, and so on. I think
wonderful.
It's really interesting for all of you.
Thank you so much. We look forward to hearing more about that. Okay, I do want to invite one more, Oksana, so sorry. We've had a couple hands up for a while. Before we close, Zani from Cape Town, South Africa, please go ahead. Oh, we do hear your dog, but we don't hear you. Okay, Zani, if you're not there, we'll move on to someone else's question, if that's okay. We have Wilile, and then I think we'll have to summarize and close. Wilile, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you very much about that information. And I think I'm from South Africa, I think as a member of the Community Advisory Board, we will work with the community and with the... Hello?
We hear you.
Oh, okay. I think I will work with communities, and soon I am a CHW and to Zuma Clinic. I will work with the Department of TB and community. Every day I'll do the health education about the TB in my clinic in South Africa. Thank you very much about that information.
Thank you so much, Wilile, and thank you for your dedication to your CAB.
Yes.
Wonderful. Oksana, do you want to go through the results from this poll, and then we'll see if we have time for final comments?
Yeah, absolutely. We think that all of the above is absolutely crucial for CABs to disseminate successfully the results of the Zenix trial. So absolutely is important, and even if there are, especially taking into consideration that there are still people who have not yet disseminated, I think we can facilitate and consult the plan, like engagement plan, to result dissemination in the future next 2 or 3 weeks to see how they are planning the result dissemination. TB Alliance will definitely provide a PowerPoint presentation in an accessible language to be disseminated, or I know they're absolutely open to have their own representative, as we had Falida presenting the results. It depends what is the target audience in your country, so you need to decide. So I think everything is important, but what is mostly important is the wish to do it and to disseminate and to make all these good messages, because there are absolutely critical messages for us to disseminate, taking into consideration the WHO recommendation And the expectation is to have all these regimens accessible for our TB people in a programmatic use. Absolutely crucial. What I wanted to say and to refer to our participants who came with their own experience, I think it's important to understand that Nestani spoke of their approach to disseminate, and we see how important is the role of communities and engagement with them. Then we have Wileli, a TB CAB member, who is engaging actively with the scientific and the research team to disseminate, and we see how approaches are in the end very similar. Even if we are coming from different angles, we have one goal, and it's important to disseminate. So that's it. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I know that we're at time. I see some other hands raised. I'm going to just give a couple of extra minutes available to some other members, but I wanted to actually ask our partner in KwaZulu-Natal, South Africa, Nompumelelo Motong from Kingdom Zulu, to share a little bit as well. I know from the last conversation we had, Nompumelelo, you shared a lot of very similar strategies for disseminating results to your CAB and to other members. And your CAB had some really key questions for what's next. And I was hoping that you might be able to share a little bit about that with everybody.
Greetings, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the privilege of speaking on this platform. And we are very excited about dissemination. And as our CAB member, Welile, has just spoken, because it gives us confidence in what we're advocating for, especially in the field of research. So one of the questions that came out from the CAB members, they were so excited about about this dissemination, like the simpler and the easier regimen, such that they wanted to go back to their clinics and make sure that it started. And so it was like, what next? The question was, what next? What are we supposed to do from here? So it was that kind of energy that I liked from them. But as you have also alluded to the fact that South Africa is in a state where BPAL containing regimen is in the process of being rolled out all over South Africa. So it was just a matter of like, cool down, everything is in order. Right now we have got sites, even Kingdom Zulu Hospital. We are very fortunate that we have got this BPAL containing regimen in our sites. We are also involved there. So it's going to be rolled out to the clinics. For us now, it's just like in knowing and informing, but we're not going to be going to the clinics to change anything because everything is in the process. It was that kind of excitement from the CAB members. Thank you. The what next? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mpume. And I think that's such a key question and something we've been talking about really for the last whole year with the series that, as you and I were running last year, which is that preparing for the what's next, making sure that you can go farther with the information that you have to share and reach individuals in your region or in your country that have influence to change policy. And it can be a very powerful experience for CAB members and for local teams that know these regimens really well because they've gone through the whole process of seeing a clinical trial happen in their location, really have a lot of strong information and experience that can be very influential. So I hope that we can continue the what next discussion in the future, because that really is the bridge that we want to make sure we're building between engagement in active clinical research and making sure that that engagement can follow through to when products are made available, which is where we are now, and that's pretty exciting. I know we're past time. I want to thank everyone for joining. I would welcome anyone who wants to stay on for a few more minutes to please do. We have several other hands up, and I'm willing to stay on to let everyone share if that works for them. I just wanted to go to, actually, I'm going to ask Ezio if you have some comments. I know we've referenced your work and your leadership in the STREAM trial and also the work that we did last year to build capacity to advocate. And I just wanted to invite you to give any responses to the discussion if you'd like.
Thank you, Stephanie. I think this is a very exciting moment for people to be sharing their experiences. I would just add one thing. Most of things have been said, but I think one very important aspect, which actually is the continuation of results dissemination, is preparedness for the discussion of for policy change. What I mean is the revision of guidelines, national guidelines, how people can influence the global guideline development, or how they can participate in the discussion, etc. I think the preparedness is being done by means of the study follow-up along the CAB work, all these years, but also the preparedness for the results dissemination. This provides people a lot of tools and conditions to be discussing in policymaking forums and be helping the countries to discuss what is the best for the country and how the implementation can go. I think we under TB Alliance, we have fantastic outcomes in really game changer studies, and we are obviously focused on what's next. I think that's as I think you said very clearly, that we need to further discuss that. So I think the point now is to think like, how can we further support the common advocacy? How can we support the countries to be, the advocates to be more involved in the discussion of policy making for tuberculosis, and then make possible for people to access new compounds, new drugs, and to have an improved treatment for people with TB. So I think that there's still a lot to go, and definitively, like Oksana has said, the work doesn't stop with the study dissemination. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ezio. There are 3 other people with hands up. I just want to give them an opportunity to speak, and then we'll close. Again, anyone who needs to jump off the call for other commitments, we understand, and thank you so much for being here. I wanted to invite Zani to try one more time to unmute yourself. I know you're having some difficulty, so please go ahead, and then we'll go to Pavel if you still have a question, and then Pinda Galela in Johannesburg.
Hi, Stephanie, everyone.
Hi, Zani.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So yeah, I think it's very important that we use all the reach all the levels in our dissemination plan. And so we at the Lung Institute in Cape Town, starting with our biggest stakeholder, are the clinics, the City of Cape Town, and especially the staff who partner and work with us to identify participants. So as the community engagement leads, we attend the management meetings with the city staff, and that's our platform to share, and we'll do presentations and have handouts. And then we work with our recruiters that are based in the clinics to reach the participants, because they were instrumental in identifying and doing the research sensitization, and walking the road with the participants on the study, doing follow-ups if needed. So they are key in that aspect. And when it comes to CAB, I think that is really our tool and a very instrumental one in that to reach the wider community. So we are very fortunate to have committed CAB members who have, who are part of various organizations and NGOs, and through them, empowering them, training and giving them resources, they are able to create platforms for us to share with NGOs and the wider community through community events. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing, Zani. That's really helpful to get another perspective from Cape Town. Pavel, if you still have a question, please go ahead. And for anyone else who would like to hear Pavel in English, you can select the English language channel. Go ahead.
Конечно, главной целью распространения результатов исследования является внедрение режимов лечения на страновом уровне. И я бы предложил примерно в конце года или в начале следующего организовать межстрановой или международный форум по лучшим практикам внедрения уже новых режимов лечения как результат распространения информации об проведении исследования.
Thank you so much for sharing. May I just ask a follow-up? Pavel, is this an engagement that, who is organizing that event that you're referencing?
Just a suggestion that we
Можно его организовать как бы и онлайн, но было бы неплохо, чтобы во главе организации лучших практик внедрения режима лечения БИПАЛ как результат распространения информации об исследовании, которое пришло к финалу, был TB Альянс. Это было бы достаточно позитивно рассмотрено.
I think
Thank
we
you
already,
so much.
Yeah, just
Go
to
ahead.
add that we do have a hero already. We have South Africa, so we can. I think it's time for them to be proud.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And I will just say, I mean, Pavel, I think that that is a really important event to have take place. I will say that, you know, there are opportunities for groups that have implemented operational research for BPAL to share their experience. And now with the access programs like in South Africa, I know that leaders in South Africa have been sharing that. But what I will say is that that often happens at international conferences that may not be accessible to all community stakeholders. And so I think that what I take from your comment is that we need to provide an opportunity to have a broader audience for that discussion. I know that, just a plug for the Union Conference coming up in November, there will be a Community Connect platform at that conference that is free of charge and anyone can sign up to attend. That is a great opportunity to get a lot of information about the discussions that are happening at the global level around new treatments. Just lastly, I just wanted to invite Pinda to come in with his question, and then I think we will have to close for today. Pinda, if you're still there. Oh, I'm not sure that we have. I think we maybe lost Pinda for another commitment. Well, thank you everyone for being a part of this discussion. I think that we succeeded in sharing a lot of different best practices. We will share these slides with you, the recordings, and the knowledge assessment tools that we're putting together as tools that you can use to start preparing if you have not yet started preparing for results dissemination. And TB Alliance will also follow up with additional communications materials such as the slides, one-pagers if we have, infographics if they're useful, and also a script that can be used for sharing results with trial participants. And that is something that has to be adapted with the local PI to make sure that it's locally relevant to the participants that were enrolled at that site. Thank you so much.
Thank you so
May
much,
I-
Stephanie, and thank you, everyone. It's been a pleasure as always to see people responsive and engaged in discussion. So it's a good thing here.
Thank
to
you.
discuss. Thank you so much for everyone.
Take care, everyone. Have a
Thanks.
wonderful rest of your day.
Have a
Thank you
good
so
day.
much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
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 Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.